Without further ado, here, sometimes being in the right place at the right time, doing a little hard work for good results. It's what it's all about. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Bruce Linton, and his bio is in your package there, from Tweed Marijuana Inc. To share a little bit about, basically this was probably one of the most covered media events in the way of how they've gone from chocolate to marijuana, medical marijuana. So I'm just going to leave it like that and welcome Bruce to the podium.
Driving there. Now, the people in the front probably can't tell I'm trying to do Movember. The people in the back for sure can't tell that I'm trying to do Movember, but I throw that out there because the reason Tweed all agreed, and it was a vote which I lost, that we would do it is because Movember is about a conversation that should have been occurring earlier. And it's about the fact that even the general manager of the Ottawa hockey team ignored signs for 10 years. And now he's regrettably in a very terminal state. So we thought it was an alignment that wasn't unreasonable because we're about a conversation. And often we try to start the conversation with a lighthearted comment, which is pretty easy when you locate a marijuana facility in a former chocolate factory. Mayor Staples has had some terrific one-liners on it, but you do that so that people unfold their arms and they quit being concerned and they begin to engage. And if you stay on the comedian track, you don't make money. But if you use that as an opening, you can certainly evolve a conversation that then may lead to financing, it may lead to patients, it may lead to doctor's adoption. And so I thought some of the best lines were, you know, now we know why the Oompa Loompas were so happy. That was a good one. And Mayor Staples, when he was announcing that we were having an open house in a year ago, about now, he announced it at a venue, and he gets up there and says, you know, they're having it, and it's great they're having it, but it's very unusual. They're only going to have coffee. The rest is potluck. So where are you, Dennis? And don't ask him for more. He'll interrupt my whole session because he's had a lot of them. So I use that because when we arrived in Smiths Falls, the reason we arrived there was because of municipal bylaws. And so I knew that there would be a business opportunity in creating medicinal marijuana, and that it was, in my opinion, that it would be a very large market with a very high overhead of compliance with Health Canada. And therefore, to start small would be a plan to for sure lose money, because if you're going to have to spend about $500,000 a year just to comply with your regulator, you can't have such a small base of initial business that's impossible to get forward. So the thought was we should really find a place to be and rent a large location and start. However, there were only 2 areas in all of our reviews that would permit the growing of an agricultural product and processing inside an industrial building. And it kind of makes sense when you think what Hershey did, right? They're taking raw materials and they're moving them through that process. Almost every other jurisdiction defined what we do as having to occur in a greenhouse. And we then had to process it somewhere. So we didn't want to get into the game of resolving and revising municipal bylaws and zoning and official plans and all that. So we arrived and we found Smiths Falls would be a suitable place. We then looked around, and the only place that made sense was the Hershey plant, and the people were not that interested in renting it to us because we were in a sector that didn't yet exist, doing something they couldn't comprehend as possibly legal. So we had to acquire the building. And for myself and my partners, that was our first entry into commercial real estate. So, you start small, get 460,000 square feet, and you begin to figure it out. So this is our story. I recognized that my session was going to be immediately after lunch. I had no idea it would involve mashed potatoes, which caused me to really relax. But I have mainly pictures. This is the part that kills me. Because we became the first publicly listed company in Canada doing this, and we became the first publicly listed company in North America with a federal license to do this, it got quite a bit of interest. But you have to put this up every time so as to tell you that whatever you hear at this occasion, you should not apply to making any investment decision. I'm not sure how people make investment decisions if they don't hear things and use that information. But Health Canada decided about June 19th a year ago that the new rules would come into play. And the new rules were to replace the old rules. And the old rules were really funny rules. About 10 years prior, the government had been forced to allow people to have medical marijuana as a medicine under a human right challenge at the courts. And when they were forced to do that, the bureaucrat in charge said, well, fine, we'll do it, but because we have none, grow it yourself. Okay, there was only 400 of them. Once people heard that you could be sick and get the right to grow your own marijuana, that caught on. And like, it really caught on. And so you had 36,000 people in Canada who'd gone through a very rigorous process of confirming that they needed marijuana and that they could grow it or have someone else grow it. And through a multiple of challenge after challenge, before you knew it, you in fact didn't even have to grow it for yourself. You didn't even have to really ever see it being grown. It wasn't even like those winemaking operations where you had to go and open the tab of something and say, there, I just made wine. You didn't even have to do that. And so you started having locations where they didn't have to tell the police that they had the right to do this, and they were growing lots and lots of marijuana for many, many people. And the police were quite upset because how do you know a good guy from a bad guy? And there was no way to know. And so the new rules were set up to make it such that that old process had to disappear, and the new process had to be that you grew the product in an environment which was much like producing any medicine, and it was very controlled. And through that, the government said, we recognize that what we've also been doing is not making it easy. We've really tried to slow down the process of being allowed to grow marijuana. So they were making up until April 1st, you had to fill between 20 and 32 pieces of paper in with your doctor, send them to your bureaucrat at Health Canada, who promised never to give you an answer in under 8 weeks, as much as 2 years, and it could be no. And still, 36,000 people got the right. So what happened as of the 1st of April, they said, we, the government, have no role. It's you and your physician. It's 2 pieces of paper. And so as entrepreneurs, I think we recognize quickly, you've got to have demand if you're going to have supply. And so when they said that they were going to make it reasonable access by seeing your doctor without a government bureaucrat, my assumption was that 36,000 people could quickly become, based on arthritis symptoms, cancer treatments, people dealing with Crohn's, colitis, MS, Parkinson's, a lot of the places where the product gets applied, and it's maybe as good or better than other things, but at least it has a possibility. You probably have 750,000 people who might, over the course of their life, become a patient. So now we're starting to match demand with supply. To keep it interesting, and I apologize, this is the second last picture, I just wanted to give a time horizon. Last night we received an award as one of the best new businesses in Ottawa. And we began in Ottawa just because they gave us a free place to have a small office, and we were looking around, so they've claimed us as one of theirs. But we began literally less than 2 years ago even looking at this. About 18 months ago, hired the first employee who was going to be the person who would grow the product, but we had nowhere to grow it, and we had no sureness that it would happen. Last year at this time, there was maybe 8 or 10 people and a bunch of construction workers running around the facility in Smiths Falls. And so things started heating up. Last year on the 27th of December, we finalized the purchase of the Smiths Falls facility and raised another $3 million. In January, we raised another $3 million. We began the listing process and became listed the last day of March, first beginning days of April on the TSX Venture. When we listed, we raised about $6.5 million at that time, and people went crazy because we're the first and only available option to purchase in this, and our market capitalization ran up to about $150 million the first day. We had some challenges with our investment bankers because they weren't going fast enough, and they understood they'd be fired if they didn't do one thing, which was really impress us by showing how they could actually sell this $15 million of stock, put the money in our bank, and we didn't have to do any of the work, so they did that. So we put another $15 million in the bank on May 16th. And so that we would have a milestone event in June, we bought a huge greenhouse in Niagara-on-the-Lake that was in the process, that's about 360,000 square feet, and added that to our repertoire. And so that was kind of how we spent the first year. And it was pretty busy, and I think this year is going to be way more busy because what we did is we filled that greenhouse with plants, and you get to see them soon, and we harvested them, and we harvested a whole bunch of plants that were now coming out of Tweed in Smiths Falls. So the effect is that we start to create what's necessary to have income, which is inventory. And that's because there's a very big demand out there that's not yet met by the current supply source. So when we get to December, one of the lines, we tend to try to market to smart people because it's our view they have money. Many of them are going to have a very green Christmas. So in the Smiths Falls facility, if you drive by Hershey Drive, at the north end is where the milk arrived and it was processed and it was turned into things, and those things were put in boxes. And at the very south end is where all the boxes were stored and sent out. That area is about 168,000 square feet. That's where we have our principal operations of growing. So the upper picture is after we spent about 3 weeks taking shelving apart. Because there was a lot of shelving and it was attached to the floor. We thought it was a blessing. We'll sell all this stuff, it'll be great. There's no demand for like 4 miles of steel shelving when you just have it. So we still have a lot of shelving. The facility that we have there is perfect for us because both of what exists and the potential to expand. So realistically, we wouldn't use the balance of the facility for this. We'll use it for other things. But we could probably put another 200,000 square foot building up on that premise and continue to consolidate in one location. A greenhouse, the reason we did this was really that when we were looking at the opportunity, growing indoors has high certainty. And the next pictures walk through that. But what you can do is you, about 5 times a year, cause the plants to go into flower. And what we harvest is the flower, and we sell the flower in a dried state. But you're controlling every aspect of nature. You are making this the perfect sunlit, humidity-controlled, airflow, temperature the plants love. And to construct each room is about $450,000. And then to operate it, our electrical bill will be, on an annual basis, north of $1 million for sure, and we're trying to find ways to make it less than 2. When you put it in a greenhouse, the good news is you harvest rainwater, you use the sun, maybe you only grow 3 crops in a year. The bad news is pests want to get in, little bugs and molds and mildews. And just like wine, you can have a terrific year or you can have a terrible year. However, your cost of production is maybe 1/5. So we thought in the anticipation of the potential of legalization or in anticipation of the fact that we might be able to sell something other than the dry flower, extracted oils, having a really big greenhouse could be advantageous. The portion that's green is my attempt to color the part that we're using. And I give you that in that we acquired it on June 19th, and we quickly moved it through to having a license. And that's easier said than done. There were only about 13 or 14 licenses issued in Canada. There were over 1,000 parties who wished to have a license. And it's not who you know, it's how you approach the process. And so who has ever worked in a regulated government compliance sector? Like, we got it. We understood that putting in documents which said we will resolve that later isn't going to get you the answer you want now. And so our application was 604 pages to Health Canada. And so we understood what they needed and we moved through fairly quickly. So when this one came along, they had made it most of the way, but not all the way. And so it took us from June 19th until August 11th to have a second license where there are now over 1,000 parties in Canada wishing to get a first. These are marijuana plants inside of a greenhouse. One thing we discovered is that we are all now eco-friendly because the cost base is really low to produce them, but we did it on a scientific basis. We were unsure which plants would enjoy the sunshine and which ones wouldn't. And so in marijuana, there isn't a single type of marijuana. There are many kinds. We sell about 30 kinds. And maybe I'll just pause there for a bit. The reason we do that is some types of marijuana are very close to what's called hemp. And hemp is a very old plant that was used by the British to create the ropes. And you had an obligation if you were, say, down in the Belleville area a couple hundred years ago that you had to actually grow hemp so they would have enough material for ropes. Remarkably, some of that hemp has been crossbred, and they actually have marijuana in the Belleville area, which is named after the canoes and things, and it evolved. But these two types, one which has a lot of pain-killing attributes and one which has a lot of nervous control systems. So if you have Parkinson's or epilepsy or MS, you're getting a lot of false triggering of your neurological systems. You may not be in pain. However, if you've been in a car accident and you have chronic back pain, or if you've got neuropathic pain, or if you're going through a treatment where you're getting nauseous, could be chemo, then you're dealing with a different medicine set. And if you're female or male, young or old, you tolerate marijuana very differently. And if you're trying to get out of bed in the morning and you have arthritis, you want to have a very clear head, but you want your hands and arms and knees to begin moving. And as you get to lunch, maybe you need a small amount of appetite generation, but at night you don't want to be using sleeping pills. Because as people would know, sleeping pills are reasonably addictive and don't stop you feeling groggy in the morning. And so we have strains which fit by time of day, type of symptoms, and by age and sex. A 18-year-old male tolerates it very differently than a 70-year-old female. And so part of the process of marijuana is helping people have tailored medicine by time of day and type, but the way people consume it is not smoking it. A majority of our medical patients actually inhale a steam, so there's no combustion of carbons, because what you want is the release of the oils. And they release at differential temperatures, and there's very reasonable pieces of gear, which are very small, that do that. And the reason that matters is if you take a pill, like if you and I each have one pill for something, it affects each of us differently. But once it's in you, it's going to be what it's going to be. Where with medical marijuana, people use it in a small breath of steam, and if they feel quite quickly the effects that they wish, maybe they start to move it better, they don't take more. The other part is it doesn't metabolize through your liver. And so an awful lot of the medicines we're accustomed to are very damaging or demanding on our liver. This is not. So that's kind of marijuana 101. And listen, I'm not a patient. I've never bought a gram of the product. I just like the business opportunity. So the people who sent the things in saying, I like marijuana, can I have a license, didn't get one. This is a quick shot around to give you a sense of what it looks like in there. We were very fortunate that September was fantastic. If people recall the summer, it was a bit sketchy, but as September arrived, it was better than July. And so we sent our plants down, and they did terrific. We brought them all back to Smiths Falls to be harvested and cured to get ready. It just was a very good first experience, and we'll do that again in December. The rules with Health Canada are very clear. Each thing you do where there's products, you have to have security cleared people and armored guards. This is treated in a very specific and structured way, but then it's in a glass greenhouse. So you figure that one out. In Smiths Falls, so if you're looking at the front of the building from Hershey Drive, the way you lay out a plant, so usually the females in the audience appreciate this part of the presentation, which is that our Society of Marijuana, as we produce it, has absolutely no use for males. We kill the males if they ever occur. And it's super productive when it's only females, and it's extremely unproductive if the males have any chance of being around. And the reason is, the way it works is we were allowed to acquire starting materials, genetic materials, up until the last day of March. And we acquired over 100 different varieties from the people who were in that old system I described. Then you plant the seeds, and you grow them up, and they become what are these pictures, which are called the mother plants. And what occurs then is the mother plants grow quite quickly in that lighting system, which looks like fluorescence. There's not enough energy in those lights to cause them to have flowers, but they vegetatively grow quite well. And you'll cut them off about every 3 weeks. You can take 60 clippings off of them. And those become the ones which are your productive output. The mothers stay for quite a long time, a couple of years. That's what the mothers look like before they get trimmed down, and those are the babies. And so the way that the babies work is you place them into these little coils, and they have nutrients. And when we did our first cycle, we had about a 72% success rate of the ones we cut off becoming ready to go. But in this game, because no one has done this at this size, it's not about reading a book. It's how quickly can you apply a learning process and use IQ to get better. We're at about 99.5% success rate now on the propagation. And so what we were measuring was where we were, and what we looked at was what caused us to do better. And so in this sector, I think probably one of the reasons Tweed has done reasonably well is that we try to figure out every day where are we and how do we get better. And so in the case of those things, we changed about 5 things. When you cut the plants off, you use a scissor, but before you put them into that little plug, you use a scalpel, cut it at an angle, apply a little bit of a nutrient, and rather than watering them from the top, you want the roots to go at the bottom, we put the water at the bottom. If you want to have water, you should go get it, Miss Plant, actually. And all these things combine to create a much higher success rate, which reduces our operating costs, increases every aspect of what you measure. Part of what we did is we also began to realize that they quite liked humidity and warmth. So we cover them for the first 3 days, and that wasn't generating enough humidity, so we actually have nice little heat blankets that we put under, heating pads. And so for 3 days, they're almost like in a tropical zone. And so all of these things contribute, and it doesn't matter what you're doing in business. If you can figure out where you are, measure why you're there, and figure out what the target is, you can quickly move forward. Where we spend all our money. So this room is what's called a flowering room. The plants grow from that little one in the fluorescent lights until they're about 18 inches tall. Then you move them into here. That room has 88 1,000-watt light bulbs, which generate a lot of heat, and and a lot of light. Plants of all types, and this type specifically, love CO2. And so we charge the room with CO2. It's about 5 times atmosphere, so at about 1,500 parts per million. And because we want to keep the CO2 in there, we can't discharge the air. So we spend a lot of time, that room will empty of air, and it's about 2,000 square feet. It empties of air every minute and a half, constantly turning it over. And we cool the air down, so it always stays around 72 to 74. We keep the humidity about 45%, and we do that because in the legal way of producing this, you can't apply any pesticides, fungicides, or herbicides. Everything has to be done naturally because it's going to be consumed as medicine. When you compare and contrast that with the grow ops that you would hear of in a newspaper story or see on the TV, the reason the house falls down is if you don't run that kind of system, it is super humid and super hot. Yet the people producing the product produce this product that looks spectacular. And they do that by lacquering it with all kinds of chemicals that are marked on them poisonous. And so one of the challenges I think people wrestle with, I'm not necessarily in favor or opposed to legalization. I have a business view. But I think that if you recognize where perhaps people are getting product now, they're getting a lot of negatives and a lot of unintended ingested items. And so we were allowed to buy and sample that product by labs, not by persons, and look at what is in it. We even found some strains which had DDT on them. So you really do have to not turn a blind eye that if this is going to occur, there may be a better way to do it than allowing it to occur in houses that get rotted away and molded because the product's not so safe. That's what you sell. And it's only in Canada that we're only allowed to sell the dried flower. We have to go to great lengths to trim the leaves off and cut the stalks up, put them through a shredder, mix them with soil, put water on them, make sure they're in a secure place, and compost it away. In every other geography, you're allowed to squeeze the oils out. And if anybody's seen a CNN special that a gentleman named Dr. Sanjay Gupta ran, which was how a child who'd been having up to a couple hundred seizures a day, trying all these different medicines, they were given instead a CBD oil, which has no effect on causing you to feel stoned, if you will, but it moderates the shaking. All of that's extracted. It doesn't come from selling them a dried flower. So I think we'll find in Canada that we're allowed to do more things, which means in a business context, I'll have less waste. It will mean that the people who take away our garbage will have less business. So how does it look from the inside out? Everything you see here that's been constructed, we've tried to make sure that if it could be acquired in Smiths Falls, it came from there. If you had to go like to Perth or Kempville, get it from there. But we really didn't want to have crews or gear or anything. To the point when I came to the site early on, and the Hershey site didn't have the water turned on yet, so there were no toilets, so somebody got a porta potty, and it said that it was from Ottawa. I locked the door and said that if you guys want to use one, you should try and find one locally. And so it sort of got the message in that that's our intent. And so our construction crew, the electricians, the HVAC guys, they all drive like 5, 10, and 8 minutes to work. And we've spent about $7.5, $8 million inside that building already. And so I think we're causing a reasonable multiple to occur in the economy. But this is what it looks like. The rooms are about 2,000 square feet, and they're made with steel construction. It's a concrete floor that gets sealed so that we don't have to pay to make air conditioning in the winter. After we did our first 3 rooms, which were done in a bit of a hurry, and we were making air conditioning in January, we asked the guys from McNamee and a few of the others, how would you change that so it's less costly to operate? And now we have a heat exchange system, which is a pretty big system where you, as soon as it's 2 degrees Celsius or cooler, we get to use the cold air. So like on Tuesday, I was probably the most excited person in Smiths Falls that I could quit paying for, fantastic, it's cold. I don't have to pay for air conditioning anymore. But that's the kind of stuff you put in. These are the rooftops of the units. So what we're building is really a very large commercial scale facility. And maybe as a small aside, Health Canada and their regulations, when they came out, we expected everything they did, except they had one thing they added, which is fill out the 604 pages of paper, describe us exactly how you're going to do it, and then please build one so we can come and check it out and give you a license. That last part wasn't anything we were expecting, and it did make it harder. And at first we thought it was unfair, but the advantage of doing something quite difficult is that others don't. And so we figured out a way to build one so they could come with a clipboard, inspect it, and give us a license. A whole lot of people couldn't get over that first hurdle, which has turned out to be quite an advantage. Hershey left us lots of stuff. So this slide shows you those fences are about 3.5 feet high. They left huge silver containers everywhere, and we moved them around, so this could become our watering system. You look at that huge thing, and the containers that are to the left of them, I think it'd be the same on yours, are some black containers which have 4 different types of nutrients. Everything we deliver to the plants has to be organic. It can't be, chemical driven. But then it goes right down to the individual plants where you see those white lines. Those are watering each of the plants based on where they are at a stage of growth. We never have a person watering a plant. I can tell you we hated the watering system for at least 2 months, because trying to go from this very macro thing on a huge scale that's never been done indoors down to that was not easy. But where the municipality was quite helpful is if they were going to flush the lines to get rid of fire hydrant water, or if we needed to have sampling done so we knew exactly what the quality was in terms of a number of attributes we had, they were there instantly. And so that, I think, began where the first meeting we did was in camera and everybody was supportive, until about a month ago or 2 weeks ago, I was allowed to be the keynote speaker at the Smiths Falls Chamber of Commerce, which is quite remarkable, right? 1 year after you arrive in a town saying, can we please grow pot in your town, to be back as the keynote speaker. But I think we've conducted ourselves quite professionally, and we've really been able to work in concert with the officials. That door is as big and heavy as it looks. In the way that this works, that door is the only door into a 5,000 square foot room, which is one of the most expensive humidors you can imagine. And it's where you keep all the good product. And it's protected by cameras, seismic detectors, and lasers. So the person who was sweeping up around it early set off all hell because they swept too vigorously. That, of course, causes the people right across the road, which are the Smiths Falls Police, to be immediately aware of the activity. So, second last slide. I think that the topic of my talk was to be the right place at the right time. And, it really was a macro trend, which was based on the fact that the assumption was that the Tories liked the police liked the old system, change would occur. And that we began running straight at that. And we got to do a lot of things first, like becoming the first publicly listed company, the first company to have 2 facilities, the first company to have a greenhouse, the first company in the sector to make an acquisition. And I think there's quite a few more firsts ahead, but we couldn't have got there if there was not municipal support. Like, a first question for Health Canada is, did you give the fire chief, the police chief, and council a letter? And did you tell them what you're going to do? And what was the reaction? And if the reaction is we hate them, we don't want anything to do with it, we wouldn't be in Smiths Falls. And I can tell you that we almost were in another jurisdiction which had the potential to have the bylaws accommodate us, but they weren't interested. And I'm not sure, I bet their local economy would have benefited from $7 million and about 100 new employees in a year. So it was appreciated. When you do put marijuana in a chocolate factory that's big, you get a lot of media. I know, Mayor Staples, what are we up to? How many? 55 media interviews and requests since we arrived. And 100% of them so far, positive. And it's because we aimed carefully with the first one, which was the Citizen. But like when you get the front page of the business section of the Sunday New York Times, and then you get most of the inside page of that section, and it's all about the great news and how this fits into a community. And when Al Jazeera English language calls and says, we want to talk to Canada's marijuana company, can we come by? Really? Sure. It's mattered because over half of our current investors are US-based investors. So that's what we've been up to. And sometimes if you drive by at just the right speed, at just the right time of the day, we cannot control the odor going out. So there is that aspect that you can experience as well. And we're trying the darndest not to have any smell come out. And some of the neighbors have said, we kind of like it as well as we like what Hershey used to send out. So anyhow, I'm going to stay around a bit after. If there's any questions, I love answering questions.